Hey guys, Justin Van Ferrari here, Waypoint Preacher Man. I love the outdoors and I love Jesus. I want to use some of the things that God is teaching me, and I just want to pass it along to all of you. My hope and my prayer for you is that you just find peace, hope, and joy in Jesus. Well, hey, welcome again. If you're joining us online, welcome. We're glad you're here. We are kind of in the middle of a conversation where we're talking about just defining the church, what the church is all about. And as I was thinking about it this week, I was really like, I was gonna really kind of dog on the idea of religion. And the more I thought about it, the more I don't want to do that. But like I've had conversations with people where like, they find out I'm a pastor, and or we're having some spiritual conversation, and every once in a while there's somebody who's like, yeah, well, I'm not religious. And one of my favorite responses, I do this all the time, like I've done it on several occasions. I'm like, yeah, me neither. You know, like, well, wait a minute, aren't you a pastor? Right? Aren't you supposed to, like, isn't that kind of like the definition of religion? And like who? But I just like, no, I'm not. I'm not religious either, you know, and so it's kind of like how do you mesh the two things, and what we've been talking about is I think that it's not so much that I'm against the idea of religion. I think I'm more like against the connotations that many people have associated with the idea of religion. I've seen a lot of just really harmful, hurtful, painful, just outright sinful things done in the name of religion. And what we've been talking about over the last few weeks, the Apostle Paul has some really strong statements against this, because in his belief and his perspective is that is not at all what Jesus had in mind. And so this morning, what I want to do is I want to take a look at really Jesus, because we've been talking about somebody who I was talking about what Jesus said, and I thought, well, let's back up and let's actually hear what Jesus said. And so we're going to look at Mark chapter 2, and then Matthew chapter 5. So we'll get in there. Let me pray, and I want to jump into this conversation here with both feet right away. So, God, thank you for today. Thank you for just over and over demonstrating your love for us. Today's Valentine's Day, and it's just we always focus on love. How can we demonstrate love towards our significant other or spouse or whatever? God, I pray that today, as we consider that we do love our significant others well, but God, also that we just reflect on the love that you have for us, and just as we step out of here, maybe we just be challenged and encouraged even more so to reflect your heart and your priorities, which is to love even those people who are unlovable. And so, God, we just give you this time. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So, I was in the back, and I was trying to, like, I was actually going to say something, and the more I thought about it, I don't know about that, but like, I'm like, I look up the definition of religion. I'm a pastor. I should probably know the definition of religion. But like, it just, I don't really, the idea or the definition behind it is, I think, really kind of a powerful. And it's good. It's a particular system of faith and worship, right? And so, I mean, that's really kind of what we do. I mean, we kind of have a system. We have a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance, right? And so honestly, like, even though like sometimes I say, I'm not religious, I'm like, oh, neither am I, but I'm not religious like we tend to think or what it's become, but really there is something or someone that I subscribe to as supreme importance in my life. And so from that perspective, I have to apologize that I'm religious, because I think Jesus is that person, right? And I believe that Jesus is God, that he came to this earth because, man, as we look around as human beings, we got ourselves into a mess, right? And we could not dig ourselves out. Now, personally, I have gotten myself into messes that I could not get out of without someone else's help. And I'm so thankful that other people have stepped in. Like when I am at my lowest, right? And there have been times in my life, and maybe you've experienced this, where you feel like you're at the bottom of this bottomless pit. Is that even possible, right? And how in the world did I even get here? And how in the world do I get out? And thankfully, a lot of us, we have stories of people who stepped in. They didn't have to, right? They might not even have wanted to, right? Because it's like, that's messy. That is so messy, it's disgusting, right? But you're just like, I'm so thankful that I've had people that have stepped into my life and done that. But here's the thing, even to a greater degree, that's what God has done for us, right? And it's such big picture, and sometimes it's so like distant or disconnected because it's God, not quite as personal, but I mean, that's what God did. When Jesus came to this earth, that was God just helping us out. The book of Proverbs speaks to this idea of like, he lifted me out of the miry clay, right? Or maybe that's Psalms. And it's just like God just stepping in where we really have no hope. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love about following Jesus is the fact that like it really in a lot of times and really kind of the idea and the connotation associated with religion is that it's a system of rules of you have to do this, you have to act this way, you have to live this way, you have to behave, you have to believe this, and this is like, in order to be one of us, you have to do this. And it just, it really is kind of an outside-in type of mentality, right? It's like, all right, if we can impact or affect or change the outward behavior of someone, then they are going to look more like what we want them to look like. And it is really complicated. Honestly, it is way easier just even as a church, as a pastor, right? Or as a parent. You guys have experienced this. Your kids are doing something. That person's doing something. Someone at work is doing something. Man, if they would just fix that, right? So I interact with people outside the church. I try to as much as I possibly can. I hesitate to tell people I'm a pastor at the beginning. Like I don't want people to know that I'm a pastor, because what I've discovered is that when they find out I'm a pastor, they change the way they behave. They change the way they talk. It's completely different. It's like, go be a pastor, right? Just try it out. Just like, or maybe even just lie to somebody and tell them I'm a pastor, right? If they're cussing up a storm, you tell them you're a pastor, and oh, I'm sorry. And then every time they slip, it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And it's like, that doesn't offend me anymore. It used to. Like somebody who didn't know Jesus would take the Lord's name in vain, or would say something that was vulgar, or say something like, I used to like call people out. Like I used to like, because I was convicted, like that is not right. That is not the right thing to do. Jesus has this perspective that it's not really behavior modification that changes somebody's life, that from the outside in, right? But it's actually from the inside out. It doesn't matter. It's not what comes from the outside that makes someone unclean. It's actually what comes from the inside. And so, and this is the part, I guess, of religion. If I'm going to dog on that part, it just seems like that begins to be the priority. How do we keep people in line? How do we keep people living and acting and doing a certain way? Well, we make rules for them, and then when they don't follow the rules, there's discipline and there's punishment and there's all these things. And what happens is people start to look at like, oh man, I know, and you feel guilty, right? There's this thing that wells up in your like, oh man, but maybe sometimes, and I'm guilty of this. Like I feel guilty, not really because of what I did to somebody else or how I treated somebody else. I feel guilty because, God is going to come after me, he's going to punish me. He's going to do the discipline. And as a father, I've learned, and as a pastor, I've kind of learned this too. Like, I can't make decisions for other people. I can't make decisions for my kids. I can't even make decisions for my wife. Like, and if I say, hey, then she just rolls her eyes at me. No, I'm just kidding. That's because I am not God, right? And ultimately, like, I view things through kind of a selfish lens, not maybe with full perspective. But I can't force this, but I can't force somebody to act or do something. And really, if I were able to do that, it's not gonna develop the right outcome, anyways, right? Because what we're gonna discover is that when Jesus was here on earth, the thing that really made the religious leaders of his day really mad, really upset, is when Jesus would seemingly do something. It seemed like he was rebelling against the system, right? And it wasn't, I guarantee, and what we're going to discover is that was not his heart, is just to look and rebel, right? As a rebellious, but that's really, that's why he went to the cross. It wasn't because he said, hey, love one another. Why don't we just love one another? Which he said. In fact, he's like, I'm going to die on like, even for my, and I don't think God really has enemies, but like, you know what I mean? He's like, the person that treated me the worst, right? That we would consider, that person's kind of my enemy, right? He just went to the cross for that person. And like, so the reason that Jesus was controversial in the first century, the reason that what actually led him to death was really not that his message was about loving one another. It was just so. It went against kind of the whole religious system of that day. What we discover is that's not really what God had in mind in the first place. And so I think what we find, number one, is it's an inside-out kind of mentality. And that is so much harder to control. That's so much harder to dictate. It's so much harder to see where somebody is. Like if I say, all right, here's the rules, right? And then you guys do the rules, and some of you don't do the rules. It's like, oh, I can see who's following the rules, right? And so, like, it makes sense why we gravitate towards that. It's so much harder to see where is somebody's heart towards the Lord. Because somebody's heart towards the Lord who just became a follower of Jesus, who doesn't know all the rules, who doesn't know, but they're trying to follow Jesus the best they can, but they still cuss and swear. It's like, okay, but their heart is moving in the right spot. And it's just really hard to see. It's really hard to like, okay, where is this person at? And it's really hard to define. And so that's why we tend to gravitate towards that. But ultimately, I think one of the major problems, and this isn't just religion, this is like human nature, is this right here. Is that we have a tendency to believe, and really in a lot of cases religion kind of pushes us this way because it's all about my justification, right? Or my raising me up. Me is of more importance than we, right? And we see this every day. Look at what's going on in our culture, in just the whole political, and I don't want to get into politics because I guarantee that there's people watching or there's people in this room, and we could have heated debates because not all of us agree on everything with that. But like the pain and the struggle, like the meanness that you see is absolutely insane, and it's easy when we look at when our perspective is that me is of more importance than we, right? Then my position, my stance, my belief, my understanding is right. And I mean, you guys operate the way you operate. You believe the things you believe. You do the things you do, right? Sometimes you don't do the things you want to do, but we make mistakes. Everybody's human, right? But like for the most part, the reason we're living our lives the way we're living our lives is because it makes sense to us, right? or we're doing the best we can with what we've been given, right? So it makes sense, but then we look at other people. And the problem with religion, the deeper you get into it, right, and the higher level that you become, and what we're going to discover, the religious leaders of Jesus' day, and they had it figured out. I remember a day when I had Christianity all figured out, and I was right, and everybody else was wrong, right? And it's like, I agree with myself, right? And I disagree with you, and I agree. But what happened is I would start, the higher I got, the more I thought I knew, the more I began to look down on other people, and I would judge other people based on what they thought or what they said or what they were doing. And what it was doing, it was elevating me over we. And it's really hard to follow Jesus when me is more important than we, because that goes completely contrary to what Jesus desires. So we tend to kind of lose sight of who we are and who other people are, okay? Now, when Jesus was here, when he stepped foot on earth and he said, I want to build my church. We've talked about that before. I want to build this gathering of people that are loving one another as I have loved them, so they're going to love one another. That's what it's going to be about, right? He kind of developed a system where love replaced law keeping, right? I kind of touched on this a little bit, and I think it made some of you uncomfortable, and it kind of makes me uncomfortable when I talk about it. It's because there's so many laws and things. We look through the Bible, and every one of those are good because it reflects God's heart, right? And I hope that what you didn't hear me say last week was we don't have to follow the Bible, because that's not at all what I was trying to say, but it's just that sometimes that outward in is kind of the approach that we take, and Jesus is like, no, it has to be the inside out. And so love replaced law keeping in Jesus' kind of movement that he started, where self-sacrifice replaced animal sacrifice, and where the vertical, right, our relationship with God really, in a lot of ways, is measured by the horizontals, measured by our relationship with others, how we treat others. And last week we said this, and this is the Apostle Paul, and we looked at this verse and kind of in the context, the only thing that counts. Not just one of the things that count, not just like, there's 10 things that are kind of important and you should try and do that. No, Paul's like, I'm so passionate about this. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself in love, right? And the reason Paul was passionate about this is because that seemed to be the thing that Jesus was most passionate about. In fact, Jesus talked a lot about this concept. And when the early followers, you read through the book of John, it's unmistakable. 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, it's unmistakable. When you read through 1st and 2nd Peter, it's unmistakable, right? These guys who were the closest followers of Jesus, when they stepped back after the craziness of the death and the resurrection and the fear, and then all of a sudden it just went to faith, and they began to just share the gospel wherever they went. It didn't matter who was going to persecute them or what was going to happen. They all kind of have similar ways of saying, hey, the only thing that counts really is faith, trusting God. Faith isn't all, it's not this, like, we don't know, it's this religious word that we don't even know how to figure out what it is now. It's just literally, all right, I want to read, this is what is on God's heart, all right? God says this, I'm uncomfortable with it, it's scary, I don't know if I even like it, I don't know, but like, I'm going to just trust that what God says is the way to go, right? That's what faith is, just trusting God. It's not that complicated, but it is that complicated because there's self and fear and all that stuff gets in the way. Faith expressing itself through love. So that's Paul's take on what Jesus said. Let me read to you. We're gonna start in Mark chapter 2, and then we're going to jump over to Matthew chapter 5. So we got two places we're going with that. Mark chapter 2, and I kind of touched on this a little bit last week, and so that's kind of I wanted to follow up on that. So one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples walked along. They began to pick some of the heads of grain. Okay? Big deal, right? Most of us like, we don't walk through the grain fields eating. I mean, I do, but that's not natural, for most of us anymore. Like, what is this, poisonous? I don't know. Let me try it. It's like, no, they're picking some heads of grain. They're just snacking along. Trail mix. That's where trail mix started, right there. So they're walking along, and his disciples are picking some of the heads of grain. The Pharisees, who were just following Jesus around, did they not have anything better to do? I don't know. Said to him, look, what they are doing is unlawful on the Sabbath. Technicality, okay? The Bible said, the Old Testament, in fact, it's one of the 10 commandments. Honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. Keep it set apart. It should be different than all the rest. It should be a day of rest. You're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. And I believe God instituted the Sabbath, right, so that they would learn. They were hand-to-mouth culture, right? And if you didn't work, you didn't eat, right? If you didn't gather the crops in, you didn't eat. And there's only so many times you can harvest, but hey, why don't you take a day off? Right? And I mean, Jesus started this when they're wandering around, or God started this for the nation of Israel. They're wandering around in the desert, right? And it's literally, if they don't go find something to eat today, they're not going to have something to eat today, right? But God says, hey, I want you to trust me, right? I know it goes against your human nature, but just trust me, right? And so then over time, this law that God said, hey, why don't you just trust me one day a week? Right? I mean, you can work hard all the rest of the week, but just one day, take that day off. Trust me to provide for you, right? I know it's hard. It goes against your human nature, right? But just trust me, right? And it was literally, I think the Sabbath is a day that God instituted literally just to help us along in trusting. Most of us don't take a Sabbath anymore, but we should, right? But it's God, I can't get everything done that needs to get done. If I don't work this or I don't do that, it's we can trust God with that. I think it's still important. But the Pharisees, then later on, it got well, okay, so what does it mean to honor the Sabbath? What does it mean to set the Sabbath apart? All right, so I think that you can't even walk out of your door, when it's a Sabbath. And there's probably all these heated debates, and other religious leaders no. It's okay to walk a little bit, but you can't walk very far, right? I don't know how the progression of the conversation went, but it's okay, all right, 536 steps, right? Beyond 537, that's work. That's not honoring the Sabbath. I don't know what the rule is. A certain distance you couldn't travel from your house, right? Now, that was not in the 10 Commandments, but that began, I think it began out of a good heart, all right? How do we honor the Sabbath? In practical terms, how do we set the Sabbath day apart, right? Well, don't work, don't walk too far, don't do it. And they developed this whole list of things you can and cannot do on the Sabbath, right? Technically speaking, as they're picking grains of wheat, right, to eat, they are harvesting on the Sabbath, right? That's work. You are not allowed to harvest your fields on the Sabbath. They got Jesus and they got his followers on a technicality, right? Now, you make a judgment for yourself. Is that really working, right? Some of you might say, yeah. Some of you they have a point. I don't know. So the Pharisees said, what they're doing is unlawful on the Sabbath because they are harvesting grain and they're eating grain. It wasn't against the law to eat on the Sabbath, but it was against the law to harvest on the Sabbath. And look at Jesus' response. And I think Jesus' response is key because I think it can apply across the board to basically every commandment or every kind of expression of what it means to follow Jesus. So the Sabbath, Jesus said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And so last week after my sermon, I always go back and I watch them and I critique and I'm I should have said this, or man, I wasn't very clear with that. And I'm probably my own worst critic. Maybe you are too, I don't know. But I thought, I think that response really kind of sums up, I think, how rules integrate with our faith in the Jesus movement, in Christianity, how it should. Because it's not so much about the rules, right? And in fact, God, every law, if you read through the Old Testament, okay? Even the laws that like about hand washing, and the laws about what women were supposed to do on their periods, right? Sorry, I don't. That was developed for the good. For God had like, I want to lead you somewhere, right? Now, maybe that was a horrible example. It's just the first one that came to my mind. But like, God's like, I want to lead you somewhere, right? And in order to get you from where you are to where I want you to be, these are going to help you. They're going to reflect my heart. They're going to show you my passions and my priorities and all those things. So here's what I want you to do. Those laws, every single law, I believe, in the Bible was made for us, was designed for our good and for our benefit and the benefit of those people around us. Okay? Even the ones that we look at and think, that is just ridiculous. Who would do that today? Well, guess what? Today we have all sorts of different technologies and advancements, that maybe as part of the thing. But Sabbath was made for man. The laws that God gave, every single one of them was made for you. Was designed so that you could prosper, so that you could, love, so that it would diminish hurt, and it would diminish pain, and it would foster a relationship of trust with God. So the Sabbath, just like everything else, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The rules were made for us, right? We're not made for rules. Right? That's why we break rules. That's just like human nature. We tend to break the rules. So the Son of Man, this really ticked him off, right? This really ticked him off. The Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath. That's like, can you imagine, the religious leaders looking at Jesus and they're already ticked off at him. He's already going against their system, and just, that looking for an opportunity to arrest him, right? Or to persecute him, to get him, like, stop talking, right? Stifle, whatever. And then he says, by the way, I'm Lord of the Sabbath, right? It's like, okay. Another time, this next chapter, right here, next chapter, next verse. Another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there, right? Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal the man on the Sabbath. Right? Now, the Pharisees never really had a problem, because they weren't healing anybody on Tuesday or Wednesday either, right? But like Jesus was going around healing people, and they're like, that should be reserved for doctors who, by the way, are not allowed to work on the Sabbath, right? Unless it's a life or death situation. But so they're watching him. What's he going to do? What's he going to do? There's a little dialogue in there. You should read it. Maybe some of you already have. You already know kind of we've read enough of those stories between Jesus and the Pharisees. We know how it goes. And then a few verses later it says he looked at them in anger, right? And he's deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. And he said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out and he was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. By the way, the Herodians, I had to look this up because I've seen them referenced a couple times in the scripture, but they were actually at odds with the Pharisees. They had really nothing in common except for we don't like Jesus, right? So they're looking for an opportunity, and they just can't get, God is here to bring hope, to bring restoration, to bring healing, to bring all of these things, and they can't even get it. And so we're kind of searching around and talking around this whole question right here. And really, when Jesus was here, this is really kind of the dynamic and the metric that he used as what does love require me? The reason he went to the cross, because he was asking and answering that question, what does love require of me? Right? Now, let's pause. It'll connect, but let's jump over to Matthew chapter 5. Right? And this is where it really gets kind of confusing. And last week, we got the new covenant, right? The New Testament. Jesus came, and Jesus, when he came, he says, hey, by the way, I want you to know that this does not destroy what God has done in the past, right? This is something new, and it's not just for the nation of Israel. This is for all people everywhere for every generation. This is something where that I want to begin the church, right? But he didn't use the word church. He used the word ecclesia, this movement. And he says, so by the way, right, some of you see that I'm at odds with the religious leaders, right? Me and the Pharisees, we don't get along, and you know, they're trying to kill me, whatever. And Jesus says, by the way, don't think just because of what you see me in conflict with religious leaders, right, who are teachers of the law of Moses, right? Do not think that I've come to abolish the law of Moses. Don't come to think that I've come contrary to the prophets, what the prophets talked about, what the prophets directed you as a nation to do. As we look back throughout the history, I just want you to know, guys, it looks like I'm at odds with the religious leaders, and it looks like I'm at odds with the law. By the way, I am not at odds with the law. In fact, I've not come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them, right? So, and really, I mean, we can look back. We have the beauty. We have the whole Bible that we can reference, and we can look and we can see. Oh man, the Old Testament, right? It's not old. It's not outdated. It actually like points to Jesus, right? And then the rest, the New Testament, the Gospels, it's like centers around Jesus' life when he was here on earth, and then the epistles in the New Testament, then they like point back to Jesus. And Jesus' point, and really kind of the whole point that we see in the whole scriptures is it centers around Jesus. And it's so awesome because only God could do that. Only God could, thousands of years before, say, hey, by the way, I'm sending a Messiah, right? And then it's Jesus, and it points to him, it points to God's heart, and everything afterwards points back to Jesus, right? And we're living after the fact, and our lives should also be pointing back to Jesus. So he says, for I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear. Heaven and earth are still here. I mean, it seems like the sky is falling. It seems like it's about the end, right? And some of you are like, yeah, guaranteed, right? But that hasn't happened. We're still here. So truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter nor the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands, right, and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be great in the kingdom of heaven. And as Jesus says this, you can just imagine the religious leaders, they're probably on the back row. They're always kind of in the back, and they're looking, they're listening, and there's like, Jesus like, but whoever practices and teaches the law, right, those will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Everybody turns to the religious leaders and like, he's talking about them, right? And the religious leaders are like, he's talking about us, right? Because we are great, right? But the problem is they were misinterpreting God's heart as applied in the scriptures, right? And that's the point. But he says that's important. It is important. It is important for me to stand up and to teach the importance of all of God's law. All of that is good. All of the Old Testament, the New Testament, it's all part of God's story, his interaction with humankind. And one of the beautiful things that we find in the Old Testament is God's heart and his priorities just expressed in such a way. We discover so much about who God is and what God desires, you know. And then Jesus shows up on earth, and we get to like see God in a bod, right? It's how in the world would God respond to this person if they were here, or that person? Well, we see that. We see Jesus interacting with all sorts of different people, and he was interacting and demonstrating the heart of God towards other people. So then Jesus goes on, and this, by the way, this is Jesus speaking all this. He says, "For I tell you," is like before you look at the religious leaders, right? Before you like, okay, they're like, before you look at them and put them up on a high pedestal, I want you to know that unless your righteousness surpasses even that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. right? So you do what the religious leaders do. That's great. That's a great way of how not to get into the kingdom of heaven, right? Well, wait a minute. But what they're saying is like, don't like honor the Sabbath, right? I know there's the technicalities and there's like, but Jesus is saying it goes beyond that. If you want to make it into heaven, if you want to do what needs to be done to get to heaven, here's what you have to do. By the way, you've heard it said, the people long ago, you should not murder, okay? Because anyone who murders will be subject to judgment, okay? But I tell you, right, some of you have read this verse. It's really kind of disturbing, honestly. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Oh, man, like, okay, wait, hold on, time out. Who does that? Who can actually do that for their entire life, right? I mean, we might be able to operate that way in small increments or at certain times or with certain people, but like, who has never, raise your hand if you've never, ever been angry with anybody in your whole life, right? Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, I'm thankful I've never said that to a brother or sister, okay? I was like, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire. Have you ever called anybody a fool? Like, that's scary stuff. Whoever says, and so what Jesus takes, it's not just about murder, right? It actually goes beyond that. Like, so like, I think like, the Ten Commandments, I used to, like, and a lot of people have this perspective. If I listen to and I obey the Ten Commandments, and I'm in. Like, I'm in, like, I do that, I'm good to go. And I realize, like, when I read the Ten Commandments, that's not really God's standard of perfection. The Ten Commandments are really kind of the lowest level of what it means to be human. I'm just like, don't kill, right? Don't covet, right? Let your neighbor's wife remain your neighbor's wife, right? It's like, don't, like, that's not like perfection. That's just like, be decent, right? And he goes on, and he says, therefore, value again on somebody else. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and remember that your brother or sister has something against you, it is more important to God, right? It is more important to God to just leave your offering there. And I referenced this last couple of weeks, right? First go be reconciled to them, and then you can come offer your gift. And what Jesus is letting us know is that, hey, God's okay, right? God can wait. That we is actually of greater importance than me. This is the dynamic that needs to be at play, right? In this movement of Jesus, this Christianity. This is what God can, like, it's not like, just forget God, right? But like, no, this is God. He's saying this is the priority that God has, right? First go be reconciled to your brother and sister, and then come offering the gifts. And we do it the way we do it. We just come to church, we sing songs to God, about God, we listen. But like, man, if you have something going on right now where there is something between you and somebody else, I would much rather you be over there working it out than sitting here at church, raising your hands and worshiping the Lord, because that's of more importance, I believe, to God. So you've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you, anyone who just looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Jesus takes that. It's like, wait a minute, hold on. That goes beyond what the law says. Yeah, the law is like, you got to surpass all of these things. By the way, what do? All right, so if we struggle with this, Jesus, what should we do? Well, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out, right? Okay, yeah. Who does this, right? And I'm looking around, I see lots of guys with two eyes left, right? Gouge it out and throw it away. It's better to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Also, if you're, can you go to the next slide there? If your right hand, now it's going back. If your right hand causes you to sin, I think something's going on with that. Go back to the previous one there, would you mind? There you go. Oh, no, next one. No, next one. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown in hell. Who does that? That seems pretty extreme, doesn't it? That seems like, man, but here's the thing, all right? God is extreme. Okay, I'll let you in on a little secret. God is extreme. God is extremely holy, right? God's standard of perfection is beyond even like what the law says. And the whole point we look at, when we read through the whole law in the Old Testament, and Jesus is like, no, it's not just about this. It's here, right? And nobody can attain that, right? And that's the point. Like, who does this stuff? Nobody does this stuff. That's too extreme. And like, Jesus, like, that's kind of my point. There is nothing you can do to earn peace with God, right? To get away from the punishment that you deserve, because nobody's going to make that happen. Nobody's going to be perfect. And really, perfection is really what God requires. And God desires. Perfection is who God is, right? Why would God allow himself to be tainted by the imperfect, right? Why should God allow imperfect people to go to heaven and live with him, right? We've messed up. We've fallen short. God shouldn't. God should not compromise on that, and we struggle to understand. Like, so, but God, I'm better, because we lift ourselves up, right? We can point down at other people because we're here, and like, I mean, God should at least let me, right? I mean, not that person. Okay, I get that person, right? But me, right? That doesn't seem fair, right? It actually is fair. It's the most fair thing you can think of. And we're imperfect and God's perfect. Why in the world would we think that if we just maybe get somewhat okay, right? Or like better than somebody else? Why should that be? Why should God allow that person, right? Or us? And we always feel like we're the ones in the right? And so we always think we should be. And God doesn't see it that way. In fact, this is what Jesus says. Be perfect. Not just good, but be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. This is really discouraging, isn't it? Because, I try, but I'm not perfect, right? You try, but you're not perfect. And even if we're perfect from here on out, I guarantee there's something in your past that made you not perfect, right? So what in the world? And Jesus leans in. And I actually love the phrase that Jesus uses over and over. He's like, but he who has ears to hear, let him listen. Right? Because Jesus leans in. He's having this conversation. You need to be perfect, right? But that's extreme. Jesus, we can't do that. He's like, well, here, let me tell you something. There's another way. Oh, yeah, okay, let me hear that. What's the other way? I am the way, the truth, and the life. And by the way, nobody gets to the Father except through me. All right, you can either be perfect and make it into heaven, or you can fall short of perfection and look to Jesus, who died on the cross to pay the penalty for your sin and for my sin and for the sin of your worst enemy, right? And the people farthest from him. I'm going to pay that penalty for you, right? You're imperfect, you made mistakes, you sin, but let me take the burden for you. It's absolutely amazing. It's just absolutely phenomenal. Jesus died for you. And you know what the good news that Jesus died for you is that if Jesus died for you, then he is for you. Right? And that should inspire, that should elicit some excitement and some wow, that is so cool. And for so many of us, we've been following Jesus for so long that the newness of this concept and idea has worn off, right? But Jesus is for us. He died. He desires a relationship with us. It is who God is. It's his expression of love, right? And really, it's a greater expression of who God is than who we are, right? If God died for every single person, no matter what they did or where they're at or who they are or what they're going to do, right? Past, present, future, like sin, he died, he paid the penalty for that. That says more about God's character than it does about our importance or our greatness or our ability and things like that. That's the beauty of Christianity. But the thing is, we need to understand, as it relates, as it connects, as we're in community together, as we're trying to just reach people for the love of Jesus, we need to understand that Jesus didn't just die for us, he actually died for them, right? And we all have a different version of them. There's always somebody that's just out, like, yeah, Jesus died for me, Jesus died probably for everybody in this room, but you know what? Jesus died for everybody on the planet. The people who hurt you, the people who, like just could care less, the people that Jesus died for them, right? And so when Jesus was on earth, and he was meeting with his disciples, one of the last times that he would have a conversation with them before his death and then resurrection, he says, here's what I want you to do. This is how I want you to operate. As I have loved them, right? As I have loved you, as I have loved them, I want you to love one another. And by the way, they will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. He's just for us, he's for them. He died for us, he died for them. And I think when we struggle to respond to other people the way Jesus responds to us, and we're going to do that. We're going to be imperfect with that. We're going to mess up. We're going to lose sight of it. But really, the reason we do that is because we lose sight of what Jesus did for us. Or maybe we just don't fully understand the gospel. We don't fully understand what Jesus did for us and the ramifications of what Jesus did for us. And so we need to constantly be going back and reminding ourselves and being reminded, finding ways that we can mutually encourage and remind and challenge one another of what Jesus did for us. Because when we view other people, when we are interacting with other people through the lens of the gospel and what Jesus did for us, how could we not respond the same way that Jesus has responded to us? So that's the church. This whole time we're just trying to define what is the church. That's the church right here. The high priority, are we doing our job as a church? Are we doing our job as a Christian? I don't know. Are we expressing our faith through love? Because that's, Paul says, seems like that's Jesus' main focus and priority. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself in love. And when we do that, people get to see the church that Jesus designed and how the church designed to be operated on. That's the difference between who we are and who we should be. So let me pray. God, thank you for today. God, not a single one of us are perfect. Some of the things that you spoke to in your word just seem extreme, but God, you are an extreme God. You are extremely holy and set apart. And yet, God, even in that, when we fall short and there's nothing that we can do except just compare ourselves to those around us and begin to put ourselves up on a pedestal, it's not about that, God, because we're all on the level playing field, right? No matter how high we can jump, we can't get there. And I thank you that there is another way, that Jesus, you came to earth so there'd be another way. And then you paid the penalty for our shortcomings. And God, I just thank you so much for that. But I pray that we wouldn't just take that and just internalize that and just, because it's not about us. It's such good news that we need to be sharing that and spreading that in very tangible ways, and just in almost even in sometimes just having that awkward conversation that needs to happen, that we might draw somebody to you. God, we're not going to get it perfect every time, so just step in and help us. But help us to trust you enough to have that perspective and to be able to express the gospel in a very real way to those around us. May we just be reminded of what you've done for us so that as we deal with other people, that we can treat them the same way that you've treated us. We pray this in Jesus' name.